Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And I hope you'll forgive me today for not coming on the show with a big old welcome, with not a big welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I don't have it in me. Why don't I have it in me? Is it because the coffee hasn't hit yet? No. I went back. This is the beauty of doing a bunch of different shows on a bunch of different platforms. Yesterday, I'm in the midst of doing the Russ Joy Show, and I realized I'd been yelling a lot it wasn't the Russ Joy Show, it was the Crossing broadcast on Monday. It's a solo show. It may as well be the Russ Joy Show, in fairness, but it's not. It's Crossing broadcast on Monday. And as I'm going through that show, I'm realizing I'm yelling a lot because I was very upset on Monday because a lot of things went wrong on Sunday with the Eagles game. And then I was thinking, all right, we'll see by Tuesday morning if I'm feeling any better. And I'll tell you in a second if I'm feeling that way or not. I'll let you know in a second if I'm feeling any better after what happened on Sunday. And for those of you who don't pay attention to the Monday show, don't worry. We're going to have a lot of fun here breaking down what happened on Sunday. But then I'm thinking about all right, what else are we going to get into? Well, we could talk about Matvei Mishkov. We talked about that on Monday, but we could talk about Matvei Mishkov and the fact that he had a really nice showing, an overtime winner, so we could get to that. Alexei Kolosov made his debut in a Flyers uniform, in a Flyers sweater, in a preseason game in relief of Ivan Fedotov last night. Was somewhat impressive, some would argue. Maybe we could talk about that. I was like, do we talk about the Phillies at all? Do we talk about the fact that the Mets and the Braves were on the field hugging it out? Division rivals hugging it out because they both made the playoffs. Because that's real competition, friends. That's what it's all about. Do we talk about that? Do we get into Sixers Media Day? Do we talk about Paul George saying that this is the first time he's ever played with an elite point guard and an elite center at the same time? Do we touch on the fact that Dikembe Mutombo passed away, very sadly, brain cancer, yesterday? Do we talk about the fact that later in the day, even after I got done doing Monday's show, that Pete Rose also passed away? And, well, there's a certain duality of man and a certain way that people responded to the death of Dikembe Mutombo versus Pete Rose. Do we talk about all that? So I took all those things into consideration. I thought about it. I let it marinate a little bit. And I said to myself, yes, we will do all of that today. Now, is it going to be a super long show? It might be. Is it going to be a 20-minute show? Probably not, unless my voice gives out, which, again, yesterday I yelled a lot. I did, because I was kind of upset on Monday. Let me pull back the curtain here a little bit. We all know that when you decide to start talking into a microphone, that's one thing. And you can continue to wear a fan hat and everything's great and hunky-dory. But when you start going down and covering teams, you're supposed to take off the fan hat and you're supposed to be objective. And that's true. And I will say in fairness that when it comes to the Flyers, I take the fan hat off, right? I want to see the Flyers succeed because I want to be down there covering a good team and doing press row show and Snow the goalie and actually getting to talk about a good team instead of a largely rudderless ship that the squad has been for about a decade. But I take the fan hat off for that team. And when I would go down and cover Philadelphia Union games, I would take off the fan hat. Even though I had been a member of Sons of Ben and had been a season ticket holder, I go, you know what? You take the fan hat off. You have to write objectively about the team and what's working and what isn't working. Fine. Sixers, I've never taken the fan hat off. I refuse to take that off unless someday somebody hires me to write about the Sixers, in which case I'll take the fan hat off. But that's got the personal connection with me and my Baba. We've talked about this on the show. My Baba's birthday would have been 101st birthday a couple days ago. Rest in peace to her. So the Sixers hat, I keep the fan hat on, right? Phillies, I'll keep the fan hat on. The Eagles, I definitely keep the fan hat on, but I don't know if it's just moving into doing sports and sports adjacent things full time that's taken some of the anger that I used to feel watching teams fall apart. I don't know if it's that, but man, I just don't find myself getting as worked up as I did on Sunday. But in fairness, it wasn't even during the game. Sunday's game, and now we'll get into talking about that one. Sunday's game itself didn't drive me up a wall in the way that I think it might have come off on Monday's Crossing broadcast. It didn't drive me up a wall in the way that it probably did for a lot of you and for your friends and for your family. And if you have somebody who you're always worried is going to throw a shoe at the TV, that's not me. During the course of the Eagles-Bucs game, I didn't actually feel that angry. Like, I went into it level-headed. Devontae Smith is out. A.J. Brown is out. Lane Johnson's out. I didn't expect the Eagles to go and put up 40 points against the Bucs. And in fairness, I think if we go back to Friday's episode, which I did not do today to clip, I'm pretty sure that I said last Friday that it was going to be a tough game, that Tampa Bay looked really impressive, that Baker Mayfield was playing the best football of his career. And like, I really didn't think the Eagles were going to go down and dominate the Bucs at Raymond James Stadium. Like, I didn't see it, okay? Once we knew that Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and Lane Johnson were out, I said, absolutely not. Like, if the Eagles score 21, 24 points, I'm going to be thrilled. Because it's one thing when you're missing A.J. Brown, and the Eagles, what was it? It was week 3 when they beat the Saints. I think it was the first time that they have won a game without A.J. Brown since he became a Philadelphia Eagle, right? The idea of losing both of your top wideouts and your right tackle, and knowing that Hurts, when he gets antsy in the pocket, tends to roll out to the right, I kind of figured was going to be a recipe for disaster. But what I didn't expect was that the defense that shut down a Saints team that went and put up over 40 points on the road against Dallas in week 3, I didn't expect that defense to get their teeth kicked in like they did in the first quarter, especially of the Bucs game. But then I zoomed out and I said, okay, one of a few things is true, and we have to try to make a determination as to what is the real Philadelphia Eagles defense, or what are we going to blame from Sunday? And so hear me out for a second, because I did actually come back down off of Monday's anger trip, and I thought, okay, are the Philadelphia Eagles defensive players as bad as they looked against Tampa, or was that merely a situation created because of other circumstances? Jalen Hurts said after the game that he has to do a better job of making sure that he extends drives, that he gets his defense in better position to succeed. That doesn't mean from an X's and O's perspective. That means that Jalen Hurts is cognizant of the fact that, like, because we had 3 straight 3-and-outs, our defense had to go out and play long drives with relatively long fields for Tampa on a field that I believe had the real feel of around 100 degrees, which is not what we're experiencing up here in Pennsylvania. And that it put the defense in a really bad spot. They got gassed. They got winded. They didn't look right. And then when the Eagles started to put together some drives, even though at least one ended in a really bad turnover that shouldn't have happened, that was en route to a potential touchdown, you at least gave the defense time to rest. And in doing so, the defense did eventually kind of lock in. Now, there was a drop touchdown that hit a receiver in the hands, and Darius Slay, who we are officially referring to as Darius from now until the time he actually makes a big play again, which I'm not convinced will ever happen again as a Philadelphia Eagle. Darius Slay stands over the receiver and makes the incomplete. He didn't cause the incompletion. He didn't break up a pass. He legitimately watched a guy drop a ball in the back of the end zone and did the incomplete. Okay, I digress. I'm not exactly sure now, 2 days later, that the Eagles' defense is hot garbage. I think that what we really saw was a problematic first quarter that was exacerbated by the fact that Jalen Hurts missed a pretty wide open throw on the rollout to his right to Saquon Barkley that could have gone for a touchdown and tied the game at 7. And I think that we saw 3-and-outs ultimately put the defense in a bad position, and they got gassed. But once they were able to settle in, I wouldn't say that the Eagles' defense looked putrid. We do know that Vic Fangio's defense is a bend, don't break. We know that when he was the defensive coordinator last year for Miami, that was the book on their defense. It doesn't mean that it's the best way to go. It doesn't mean that Vic Fangio's defense is best suited for the modern NFL. It doesn't mean I think Vic Fangio's defense is all of a sudden going to become a top 3 unit in the league. But I'm trying to be a little bit more fair and a little bit more objective 2 days later than I was yesterday. All of that said, there are legitimate concerns coming out of Sunday. Now, I'm still very much in the camp that a lot of this falls on the head coach. And we'll talk about that in a second. But allow me to dissect this really quickly. And I see a bunch of people commenting already on YouTube, and I appreciate that. If you haven't done so already, you obviously go subscribe to the Russ Joy Show over on YouTube. You can also find the show on the Joy Media account on YouTube. You can subscribe there too if you want. I want to get to 500 subscribers. This is like a small goal I have. I want to get to like 500 subscribers by the end of October. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think I'm at like 228, something like that. Let's get to 500. Tell your friends and family. Have them subscribe. I don't care if they watch. Let's get to 500. But I want to get to 500. I think that'd be really cool. Anyway, I'll get to those comments. If you're watching on Facebook on the Joy Media account, I'll get to you as well. If you're watching on Instagram Live over on the Joy Media, the Russ Joy Show official Instagram account, which I had to change the name on. First account got shut down because I think having the word "the" in a handle freaks out Instagram or something. It was weird. Anyway, if you're over there, I can't pull up your comment on the screen, but I can read it off. So if you're watching over on Instagram Live, by all means, drop a comment. I looked at Sunday's game and I said the bigger concern that I had wasn't even what was on the field. And we'll get to the offense in a second, but it's not what happened on the field. It's everything that happened away from it. That's actually what triggered all the anger I was feeling on Monday. It wasn't that in the moment I was mad at Bryce Huff for being a total zero again, although he did have a tackle. God bless Bryce Huff. He had a tackle. He got on the stat sheet. That is what we call #progress. That's hope you can believe in. Yes, we can. We go beyond what happened on the field, and we look at what happened off of the field after the game. That's what pissed me off. That's what honestly sent me over the edge. Because in the aftermath of a cataclysmic loss, that in fairness wasn't nearly as close as the final scoreline indicated, because Ringo returned that blocked point after attempt for 2 points. Eagles really should have had 14 points. The real issue that I had was the veteran leaders on the team no showing, and the veteran leaders going onto social media after and turning the tide back on the fan base, going after the fan base for being upset, going after the fan base for being upset and disappointed in boneheaded plays. And so I'm actually going to throw over to at least one of those, because I think the guy who was the most guilty of doing a very, very stupid thing, a very, very ill-advised thing, and quite frankly, something he should know better than to do, was Darius Slay. Now, Darius Slay likes to be called Big Play Slay, but in fairness, he hasn't had a big play for the Eagles that's actually benefited the Eagles in some time. So again, we're calling him Darius until he actually gets his shit together. Now, we're going to go over to what Darius had to say after the game, because this, to me, speaks to a bigger issue that we'll get into in a little bit. But Darius Slay goes out and he goes to Twitter after the game. Now, it's better to go there after the game than during the game. Darius Slay tweets the following: 150 pass breakups and counting, 28 picks and counting, 6-time Pro Bowl, all pro. When you talk bad about me, don't forget to mention the greatness of me too. Shrugging emoji. Quick question, just out of curiosity. Who the fuck cares, Darius Slay? Past accomplishments aren't indicative of future performance. Hell, they're not even indicative of current performance. 150 pass breakups and counting? I've seen quite a few passes go your way and get caught by the opposition. I've seen you get put on ice, get put on skates quite a few times, where it looks like you're genuinely playing on a sheet of ice because your ankles have been broken by whiteouts. I've seen that this year. I haven't seen much in the turnover category. I haven't seen you really make a lot of good plays on the ball. I haven't seen you make a game-changing play this season. When the team was falling apart last year, I don't seem to remember Darius Big Play Slay having a lot of big-time moments down the stretch. I don't seem to remember that. I could be wrong. If somebody wants to fact-check me in real time over on the YouTube comment section, by all means, please do. But I don't remember that really happening. Pro Bowls are kind of a joke, but in fairness, they are still an accolade. Fair to point out. All pro, totally fair to point out. Here's the problem. No one gives a shit. When your team loses the way that it did, when the defense, despite me making at least somewhat of an excuse that probably very tired and gassed, when the defense goes out and can't get a stop in that first quarter, right? Which, by the way, has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts. It has to do with the defense's inability to get a stop against Baker Mayfield, right? When the defense can't make a play, you can't then turn around and go onto social media and bitch at the fans, okay? No, when you do a bad job, the fans are under no legal obligation to sit back and say,
well, we have to give Darius Slay the benefit of the doubt here. when Darius Slay gets put on skates and we watch the ball go over the top and, he gives up a touchdown, we have to remember that he has 6 Pro Bowls and everybody makes mistakes. When Darius Slay leads the team in tackles because he's giving up receptions or because the rest of the defense stinks and he's one of the last lines of defense, well, we have to remember he wasn't all pro after all.
No, people don't do that, Darius. They don't. No one cares, okay? I just want to make sure that we're clearing that up. No one gives a shit. Your past accolades are great. And if you ever want to try to make a case down the line for the Hall of Fame, which I'm not exactly sure you will have the chance to, but if you want to, you can certainly tout those accolades. And if you want to tout those accolades to your friends and to your family, or to your teammates, or to your coaches, or to your GM, by all means you can. You cannot turn around and expect a fan base that just watched their team get embarrassed on the road by a Tampa Bay team that I actually think is better than a lot of people seem to believe going into week 4. You can't turn around and then ask them to be nice to you. But then it got worse, okay? This is where it went from weak-ass shit to, like, ridiculously weak. Because, obviously, fans weren't very thrilled with his tweet. So he deleted it, but then he made it worse because then he made his account private. Now, I haven't bothered to look this morning to see if Darius Slay's account is still private or not. But in the moment, he got to a point where instead of just shutting off the comments on that tweet, he went private. Now, I don't know what that's supposed to do. Like, the internet doesn't forget. You put out a dumbass tweet, guess what's going to happen? People are going to go after you for being a dumbass. You can't expect fans to be okay with it. Now, it got worse. So we're going to keep doubling down on Darius Slay today because it did get worse. And
Russ, why are you worried about Darius Slay? This is on Jalen Hurts.
Hold on a second. We're going to get to him. Okay. Like nobody is safe on this show today. All right. A lot of people getting in trouble. A lot of people. It got worse because then Darius Slay went and he jumped onto Micah Parsons' podcast. I'm just looking for it really quick. Oh, because there was Kevin Byard, who the Eagles went out and acquired last year. He defended Darius Slay, which obviously didn't go well because Kevin Byard was a total disappointment when he played here as well. But Darius Slay went on to Micah Parsons' podcast. He's yucking it up after the fact. People saw that. They got pissed. I'm looking for it. I know Crossing Broad put it out on Twitter. I'll see if there's anything of value in it. But when one of the leaders on your defense and a guy who had been a team captain on this team, when that guy goes out and he's yucking it up after getting his shit kicked in, we have a problem. Okay? I'm actually going to throw over to this because Micah Parsons had Darius Slay on his podcast. And they're talking about CJGJ and like the online beef between CJGJ and Parsons. And I just want everybody to let's try to be fair and objective here. We'll be fair and balanced. We report, you decide, all that. Let's try to be fair. Let's see the body language. Let's see if Darius Slay looks like he's at all bothered about the fact that the Eagles lost to the Bucs.
Man, he has some stuff said for the game. He struck again, bro.
Man, bro, that's my dog.
And before we get into this, bro, I'm not trying to, y'all know, bro, I'm all positive, bro. I'm not trying to attack CJ at all. Right. I know he took what I said personally. And, before I even get into it, who we think he is, in terms of how we feel, bro, we all in the NFL. How one of us saying that another person don't belong here, they just that type of person. You feel me though? Even with a Pro Bowl, all pro, we still could be humbled at any moment. We still gonna get beat. I'm gonna still get locked up maybe for a game or a rep.
Now I'm not gonna be mean to Micah Parsons here because he wants to be an Eagle and he'll probably end up being a Philadelphia Eagle before it's all said and done. He is right here that every good player in the league has the opportunity, has the ability, has the potential to have a great game and to also get locked up, to get shut out. And Parsons here admits it's possible. Okay, so we're still okay. Eagle goes on Cowboy podcast. It's okay. Future Eagle. It's fine.
It's just a game of football. It's just how it happened.
It happens.
So what's your thought on that, bro?
Yeah, hey, one thing I know about 8, man. 8 go bring the noise. 8 go bring the energy. And 8 go bring all the trash talking that half the team's not doing. So he fulfilled that need for us. You know what I'm saying? He a guy with a lot of energy. He go talk that trash, but you know, hey, you go talk, you got to back it up at some point in time. And if you don't, he know for sure that media go catch it on the attention, and he got to be ready to answer every time. Because if he don't, the media go on his ass every time. But you know what's up with him, man. You know what's up with him. He go do it. Now, hey, I told him, do your thing, man. But hey, you know now, you don't perform the way you want to perform, they gonna get back on you.
Bro.
So that's wild to me. Now, that's wild to me for a few reasons, okay? There's nothing in that clip itself, and I saw a lot of outrage about it, but like, there's nothing in that clip that I think is inherently wrong, misguided. The only thing about it that's not great is you just lost and you're all smiles and you're on a Cowboys podcast. And you know what? That's enough to trigger some people. He is right in that CJGJ is known as being a guy who brings a lot of swagger to the locker room. He's a guy who brings a lot of energy. And he's also aware of the fact that if you don't perform, it's not going to go well. And what they were referring to is that before the game, CJGJ said that he was going to put belt to ass on the Bucs. And then CJGJ got smoked, just like Darius Slay. It's actually fitting. I've got a pork tenderloin upstairs currently defrosting. I'm going to go put that out on the big green egg. I'm going to smoke that. Maybe I'll name it Darius. Maybe I'll name it CJGJ. I'm not sure yet. Those guys got roasted. Those guys got smoked on Sunday. It wasn't good. It wasn't particularly close. But a lot of these people and a lot of these players continue to go to social media. So it wasn't just Darius Slay, listen, if you've been a captain, you have to know better. When you've played in this league as long as Slay has, you have to know better. Isaiah Rodgers came out post-game and said that he thought the play that he made where he intentionally shoved a Buccaneers player into Cooper DeJean was a veteran-savvy play, and that he wasn't exactly sure that they were going to call that as a penalty, right? That ultimately gives the Bucs a short field. You know what happened from there. Not good. Isaiah Rodgers then goes on Twitter and makes the same stupid mistake that Darius Slay did. And now again, am I an asshole because I expect a little bit more from these players? Because I expect these players to not go out of their way and do or say stupid shit. Yeah, maybe. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's my fault. But I'm going to go over to Isaiah Rodgers, who, in fairness, didn't make his Twitter private. He did turn off the comments to the tweet I'm about to pull up. I'll show a little bit more respect to him for not setting the account private. Here's what Isaiah Rodgers had to say when he went to social media after the game. You ever been typing, then you use the backspace on the keyboard, dialed the wrong number, stocked the wrong items, ever gave the customer the wrong amount of change back, served the wrong food? I'm going to come to y'all job and see if y'all ever make mistakes. We are human. Now, I said on Monday, I think he's right. There's a fair point in here from the human perspective, but I don't think that he's fair to make that point just because people are pissed off about the penalty. And ultimately, I don't know, in my group of friends, no one was really cursing Isaiah Rodgers after the game. They're saying dumbass play, but whatever. There were many more issues on Sunday than that play. If he were getting death threats or something, then sure, that tweet is warranted because that's a vast overreaction. Now, again, there are a lot of dumbass trolls and just genuinely horrible human beings in the world who send death threats about all kinds of stupid stuff. It happens in sports. It happens all the time in pro wrestling. It happens in politics. There are death threats everywhere. Now, how valid any of them are, that kind of varies. But he's right, they're human. But the problem is if you're an athlete who's made millions of dollars like Rodgers has, like Darius Slay has, you can't expect the fans who just spent their money to maybe get Sunday ticket, or spent their money to get cable, or maybe spend their money on Sundays to go to games, or spend their money to host a party with a bunch of friends and family to watch the game. Some people go, it's stupid, like to make excuses for the athletes. Listen, if you spend money on this team, it's entirely fair for you to be upset when they don't perform. And if you're a player who is in a very privileged position to get to play a kid's game and to make all that money, you can't go to social media and look this weak. And that, I think, ultimately is the big problem that I had, because Defensively, the team didn't look that great. I was more worried and upset about like what I saw going to social media after. I'm like, that can't happen. And that to me is indicative of an overall culture problem that the Eagles have, which we'll get to in a second. But I do want to go over to some of the comments because I saw some of them. JH said, today is October 1st, and St. Nicholas is somehow, inexplicably, the coach of the Eagles. I said earlier that I was tired. Andrew Fawcett asks if I was still hungover from the wedding. No, that was a week ago. I'm back up and running. We the People News Network. I don't remember that name being here. Thanks for finding the show. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Says Jalen Hurts has a serious hero complex, which causes him not to throw the damn ball to an open wideout 6 yards in front of him. Andrew Fawcett notes that he was busy on Sunday, didn't see the game, doesn't look like he missed anything. Chris Freed thinks that I need to bring the tubular meats onto the show to get 500 subscribers. We'll see. Free hot dogs at Wells Fargo Center for the media. Very exciting. Love the hot dogs. Love the hot dogs. JH says at least Rodgers wasn't as weak, turning the comments off on who hasn't made mistakes at work post. That's exactly right. We the People says Darius Slay's new nickname is Darius Small Play Slay. He don't make plays. Nico can't stand Darius. Take the C away from him. Sean C. notes about Slay going on Parsons' podcast. Two guys that talk way too much, talking about another guy who talks way too much. When will he start eating lunch in his car? Namdi Asamoah 2.0, perhaps, right? Andrew Fawcett notes about these players. Here's a solution. Stay off social media. JH, different jobs have different tolerances for errors as well. They get paid a lot of money to be great at one thing. They should be able to do that thing without rookie mistakes. Now, all of those things I think are valid. They're all valid criticisms. Now, my issue here is that I think that there is a legitimate problem that stems from the decision to bring back Nick Sirianni as head coach. Okay? Now, there are people I've seen. There are great people on both sides of this argument. Some people think that Nick Sirianni deserved to have the right to come back and try to prove that with two new coordinators and an offseason of work that he is the coach who took the Eagles to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and that last year was a fluke, last year was an anomaly. There are people like me who are of the thought that if you're going to replace both coordinators and you've dished out a ton of money for Jalen Hurts, and then in the offseason you double down by giving out a ton of money to A.J. Brown, a ton of money to Devontae Smith, a ton of money to Saquon Barkley, that perhaps it makes sense to move on from the head coach because it just isn't working. The collapse at the end of last year was very bad. Why go into another offseason of questions where it looked like the head coach and the starting quarterback maybe don't like each other, maybe don't get along? Why add another layer of potential issues to an already maybe fractured locker room, or at least one that wasn't harmonious down the stretch last year? Why do that in the name of keeping this head coach who no one was really convinced knew what he was doing in the first place? Right? Okay, so there were two arguments. There were two ways to look at it. And I very much came down on the side that I think Nick Sirianni, the year that the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl, was a good coach, coached with his gut in a similar way to what Doug Peterson did when the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. And a lot of times as a head coach, you have to coach with your gut. You can have all the analytics you want, but what sets the good coaches apart from the great ones, or the mediocre ones away from the truly bad ones, is sometimes you have to coach by feel. But it really does seem like he's lost that feeling the last couple of years. The idea of replacing both coordinators to me, but leaving the head coach in place was insane. And especially because of the way that Jalen Hurts talked about his relationship with Sirianni at the end of last year. It set off a lot of alarm bells. Then over the summer, there were a couple of comments that came out where Sports Talk Radio ran with it for 10, 12 days, where they're like, it sounds like Hurts still doesn't like Sirianni. You fast forward to training camp, there's the video going around of Hurts and Sirianni on the golf cart, and they're blasting music going by, and everybody's like, oh, see that? That means they like each other again. I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure that Jalen Hurts feels great about Sirianni, because after the game, here's another one of your leaders, your quarterback, your starting quarterback, okay? The guy who is the highest paid player on the team, the guy that like you look to lead this group of men, to be the alpha, right? He gets asked post-game after the Eagles lose this game against the Bucs. He gets asked about the strategy going into the bye week, about whether or not he and Nick Sirianni are going to sit down, if they're going to have conversations about what's going on, about strategy coming out of the bye week. I want you to listen to Jalen Hurts himself. That doesn't sound good. Jalen Hurts himself, as like his quotes. Jalen Hurts himself. Jalen Hurts himself when he doesn't complete passes down the field. Jalen Hurts himself when he tries the tush push and leaves his. I don't know. This is getting worse. All right, let's just go to Jalen Hurts.
Jalen, you and Nick are obviously big voices on the team as the head coach and the quarterback. As you enter the bye and you want to find an identity, do you two talk about maybe, what you want the message to be to the team, or how you kind of want to handle, as you guys go into the second part of the year?
We have our moments.
All right, Jalen,
All right, so for those of you who might have not heard the reporter's question very well there, reporter says the head coach and the quarterback coming together, are you guys going to like talk about it? You going to figure it out? And let's just go back to Jalen real quick.
Maybe, what you want the message to be to the team, or how you kind of want to
Coming up with the message to the team.
handle, as you guys go into the second part of the year.
We have our moments.
We have our moments. Question. Humor me. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? Can somebody explain to me what that means? We have our moments. Okay. Let's unpack that real quick. Christmas Day. Let's unpack it. This guy doesn't like the head coach. This guy does not like his head coach. Those reports from last year about Jalen Hurts feeling like his guy, Brian Johnson, was scapegoated, and that maybe his guy, Brian Johnson, wasn't allowed to run the offense that he wanted to run, that Nick Sirianni had his hand in the pie a little bit too much, that maybe Nick Sirianni was circumventing his OC. Yeah, it looks, the body language, for those of you who are watching it, the body language is bad. The hands are in the pockets, okay? The face is kind of scrunched up. Yeah, he thinks there's a problem. And here's the real issue. If you're Howie Roseman and or Jeffrey Lurie, you decided that this was the way to go. You decided that opening this up, opening this can of worms, if things didn't get off to a resoundingly successful start, you decided that this was the way to go. Now, I'm not going to stand here, and go through like all the options that were out there this past offseason. But Mike Vrabel appeared to be a good coach. Tennessee looks absolutely lost without him. Bill Belichick is out there. Say what you want about Bill Belichick, okay? You can make the argument that the Patriots' success was all about Tom Brady. Tom Brady went off. Tom Brady won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. What did Bill Belichick do? Bill Belichick didn't have a good quarterback to replace Brady with, and I don't know if you've noticed this or not. You typically need a very good quarterback in order to win a Super Bowl. That's fine. I digress. Bill Belichick was out there. Now, if you're out there right now and you think to yourself, there is no chance that anyone from the Eagles camp had any conversation with anyone from the Bill Belichick camp this offseason, you done lost your mind. Could virtually guarantee there was at least some kind of conversation. Now, I'm not saying that Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, and Bill Belichick sat in a conference room at the facility and talked about the possibility of him coming in and becoming the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Not saying that happened, okay? I think if it had happened, he would be the head coach right now. But there are reasons why national pundits, and we brought this up on the show a few weeks ago, or maybe a month and a half ago, there was that report out of Boston that Belichick respects Howie Roseman a lot. There's a lot of mutual respect and admiration. And that, don't be surprised as Belichick monitors the Eagles situation to see how the season starts. Now, I will go back to a conversation had with Rob Motti, I think it was 2 weeks ago, on Crossing Broadcast on a Thursday. And he said he doesn't ever see a situation where Bill Belichick would come in and take over midseason. And now that we're 2 days out from a disastrous loss, I'm not standing here telling you today that the Eagles are going to actively look to fire Nick Sirianni and replace him with Bill Belichick. I will simply point out that, like, this is the problem. You could have replaced this head coach at the end of last year after a historic collapse and after a practical no-show in the postseason against the Bucs. You could have just moved on. But for some reason, the GM, the owner, both, some combo, decided it was worth bringing him back. Why? What exactly went into the decision to bring back Nick Sirianni? Is it because they believe he is a true mastermind, an X's and O's savant? I don't think so. If that were the case, I don't think you allow him to replace his defensive coordinator late last year. I don't think you let him bring in a new defensive coordinator who happens to be the mentor of last year's defensive coordinator to run the defensive side of the ball. I don't think you go out and get Kellen Moore, who is widely regarded as a very sound offensive mind. I don't think you go do that if Nick Sirianni's offense and his concepts are spot on spectacular. So again, it's like, what do you do here? What are you doing if you're Nick Sirianni? So if you're not really involved in the defense, you're not really involved in special teams, are you now meddling in the offensive game plan? Are you meddling in the play calling? A few times this season, Sirianni has said the decision to go for it on fourth down when it hasn't worked has been his decision. Is he calling that play? Or is he just telling Kellen Moore, call a play, we're going for it on fourth down? We don't actually know. I don't think anybody's actually gotten to the bottom of it yet. How much of an impact is Nick Sirianni having on Kellen Moore's offense? Are we actually seeing what Kellen Moore wants to run? Or are we seeing some Kellen Moore concepts, but still within the framework of the Nick Sirianni offense? Because right now, none of it's working. And Brian Johnson, who was here, is now working with a division rival down in D.C., and Jaden Daniels all of a sudden looks like a stud. Jaden Daniels, to some extent, kind of looks like a younger Jalen Hurts when he was more decisive, more mobile. I'm just saying, something seems off. And nobody seems to understand why the Eagles stuck with this guy. Is it because he's a good dude? Is it because the guys like him? The quarterback certainly doesn't seem like he likes this head coach. I don't need the head coach and the quarterback to be besties. I don't need to see pictures of them in matching PJs at Christmas. It would be good that when you're going into the bye week after losing that game, that your quarterback, if you want to put it on him, you can, but that your quarterback says, yeah, Nick and I are going to talk. Like, I'm the leader on this team. I'm the starting quarterback. He's the head coach. We're going to figure this out. I promise our fans we're going to figure it out. Saying we have our moments is not that. That is not a way to give yourself and your fans a resounding vote of confidence. It's not good. Now, I do want to get back to Jalen Hurts himself, though. Like, shit, I did it again. To Jalen Hurts and his play on the field. I am not one to make all the excuses in the world. But I did start off the show by saying when you don't have Devontae Smith and you don't have A.J. Brown, I think that that's going to have an impact. When you don't have Lane Johnson, that is going to make an impact. Now, there are things about Jalen Hurts' game through 4 weeks that are concerning. Missed reads down the field, poor accuracy, non-existent accuracy early in this game against the Bucs. Very poor. Turnover machine. Lack of ball security. The stuff that we used to absolutely kill Carson Wentz for, we are seeing in droves now with Jalen Hurts. That is a legitimate concern. Him getting flushed out to the left and then fumbling the ball when he gets taken down from behind, you have to have better awareness. Him being in the pocket, getting hit on the arm, losing the ball, losing possession, he's got to feel that. Like we've now seen that back-to-back weeks. It's not ideal. The decisions downfield kind of are what they are. When you are reduced to having Dotson, who's had no impact of any kind thus far this season, when you have that, like, I don't expect miracles. He's done a good enough job of getting Dallas Goedert involved. He's done a good enough job of getting Saquon Barkley involved whenever he can. But the big issue, at least on that side of things, is the Eagles don't seem to believe in just handing the ball to Saquon Barkley. Like, do you guys remember a few weeks ago? Like, I think we all remember. Remember a few weeks ago when we talked about DeMarco Murray? I know it's a taboo name. When the Eagles got DeMarco Murray, everybody said, cool. You now have a north-south back. You do have a guy who can get outside. You do have a guy who can factor into maybe some screens and some short passing routes, but like really, you have a north-south runner. This is great. And then Chip Kelly misused him in the offense, and it was an absolute disaster. I'm watching this game on Sunday. I'm going, why the hell aren't the Eagles handing the ball off to Saquon Barkley? Like, let's get beyond the fact that it is a pass-heavy offense. Let's get past the fact that, like, you had multiple 3-and-outs and you're looking to get chunk yardage. Let's just look at it from the human player management perspective, okay? Your defense is gassed because of 3 straight 3-and-outs. At some point in one of those drives, the thought had to be, we're going to hand it to Saquon Barkley on 1st and 2nd down, because if nothing else, it's going to buy our defense some time. And they need it desperately. But they didn't do that. And Nick Sirianni talked about it post-game, and it was absolutely maddening. I've spent 2 days now trying to understand what the hell his point was. But Nick Sirianni was asked about why Saquon Barkley only had 2 carries on the team's first 3 drives. And we have to get to this too, because this speaks to game plan, this speaks to the head coach, this speaks to all of it. I want you to hear why Nick Sirianni says there were only 2 handoffs to Saquon Barkley through 3 drives to start the game on Sunday. Let's hear from the head coach. Remember, the head coach that this GM and owner decided needed to come back. Here you go.
Two carries in the first 3 possessions.
Yeah, we had 9 plays. I mean, you had 9 plays, and 3 of them are 3rd downs. So now, he had 2 carries on 6 plays. I mean, that's the way football. I mean, when you go 3 and out, that no one's going to have any touches. Nobody's going to have any catches. We weren't sustaining drives. That's another. We can say what about the defense, but we weren't sustaining drives on offense. And so they were on the field a lot early on and a lot of plays. But I think if you see the flow of the game, you understand why that happened. But I mean, obviously we want him to get the touches of the ball, but when you don't sustain drives, then you're not going to be able to.
Okay, so I want everybody here for a second. Remember, this is an apolitical podcast. You know what I just heard? I heard one of those like canned responses that you get in debates. Legitimately, that to me was word salad. Also didn't really have any merit. Like, this was the equivalent of like, well, we have a plan. I have a plan. Saquon Barkley, he's part of our plan. I grew up with a visor. I have concepts of a plan. We went into this game and we believed Saquon would be part of it, but when you're turning the ball over, it's very hard. It's so hard to give the running back we paid a lot of money to. It's very hard to give him money and then also give him the ball and have him make big plays. Like, what the fuck is that? Seriously. Also, apologies for the bad Kamala Harris. I'm working on it, okay? We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Don't hold it against me. The Trump is great. The Kamala is okay. Maybe not even okay. All right, fine. Apolitical podcast, in fairness. Nick Sirianni's comments are so wildly off base, so devoid of reason, that alone should have been the reason he doesn't get on the plane back to Philadelphia. To recap, Saquon Barkley, who you got in the offseason to be a legitimate game changer in the backfield, right? Your number 1 offensive weapon through 3 weeks, now 4 weeks on this team. A guy who is not a guy who's not out of his depth like the whiteouts were on Sunday, where you don't have Covey, who had been a backup, where you don't have Devontae Smith, where you don't have A.J. Brown. Saquon Barkley's doing his job. He's your number 1 3-down running back, right? You choose not to involve him in a way that's advantageous to him and to your offense because, we only had 9 plays. 3 of them are 3rd downs. Yeah, no shit. Figure it out. This again is why I say, is it Nick Sirianni's offense or is it Kellen Moore's offense? I want to know who exactly called the plays and who installed these decisions and who installed the game plan for the beginning of the Bucs game, because that's who I want to direct my ire at. Okay? There is a significant disconnect between what any rational human being would think is the right way to go, building a game plan when you don't have Smith and Brown, and what this team decided to do. But the notion that, like, we're not going to hand it off to Saquon Barkley back-to-back plays to start 2 of those 3 drives is insane to me. We're not going to figure out a way to incorporate Saquon Barkley on maybe 1st down and 3rd down. That clip alone should have had Nick Sirianni fired. The game plan itself, you could make the argument, should have had him fired. The fact that this team wasn't ready offensively, defensively, or special teams, ready to go, should have had him fired. And yet here we are 2 days later. He is still the head coach. He will presumably be the head coach for the rest of the season. I will just clip this, okay? Everybody just make a little note. You can clip it and you can come back if I'm wrong later in the season. The only way the Eagles make the playoffs, and I'm not even saying go on a deep run, okay, because there are so many concerns right now. I can't even entertain deep run, okay? The only way that they make it is if Jalen Hurts returns or reverts back to like sort of 2022, which he physically doesn't appear capable of right now. The speed and the acceleration aren't there, okay? He needs to revert back to that guy. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown need to come back fully healthy. And that defense needs to get a legitimate contributor at rushing the quarterback other than 72-year-old Brandon Graham, who we love and appreciate, but shouldn't be the best edge on this team. That's the only way they make the playoffs. And it's the only way that they maybe make a slightly deeper run. But right now, there are so many questions on the defensive side of the ball. And there are so many questions now about the offensive game plan. They're like, I can't entertain the idea that they're going to win the Super Bowl or that they're going to make a Super Bowl. This guy is the coach? Ooh, good luck. Now, I'm done with the Eagles for now. I'm going to go over to the comments really quick because, it's an interactive show. Sometimes we do a better job of getting everybody's comments up as the show goes, but I am a one-man show. I don't have a producer. Could I get one? Maybe. Will I? Probably not. JH says, Jalen, been hurting myself today. It's inexplicable and pathetic. These guys didn't get a second of preseason again, says Sean C. I agree. HC thinks that Sirianni and Hurts are both frauds who need to go. HC wants to know how Belichick will win a Super Bowl with Hurts. I don't know. I don't know if he can. I really don't know. Because he says if he needs a good quarterback. I think Hurts is still a good quarterback. I just think that right now, there's a significant disconnect. And it makes me think that the head coach is meddling in the offensive game plan too much. Sean C says, I know the crosshairs are on Sirianni, but how many times has he fallen on his sword to shield Hurts from deserved criticism for the last 9 to 12 months? That's what he's supposed to do. He's the head coach. Andy Reid, even at the peak of his powers, and Andy Reid in his worst moments, fell on the sword for his team, for his quarterback. That's what you're supposed to do as a head coach. Doesn't mean that's right, but that's kind of where we're at. It's part of how this works. Now, We the People News Network says it's because Sirianni is a yes man. I think that is why he's still here. Andrew Fawcett asks, did Howie forget to do exit day interviews with the players? T from the TO3 says Sirianni is a turd. We the People says Sirianni is a moron. He doesn't really know football. He's just a face that can't manage time or plays. Jamie comes in here with a little bit of humor. Says, I just keep laughing every time you say Jalen Hurts himself. That's right. Sean M. Hello, Sean M. I don't remember Sean M being here before. Maybe has been. Thanks for finding the show. Make sure you hit subscribe. Russ, you belong on postgame live. Phillies or Flyers instead of Ashlyn Sullivan. No disrespect to her. You have a much more personality and speak much better. Just my opinion. Thank you, Sean. Very nice of you. I think that Ashlyn does a nice job. I will point out to you, though, that if you haven't found it already, we do the Press Row show every Flyers home game up by the Oregon. We stream that, and the Flyers promote that. So it's an online stream option for pregame, intermissions, and postgame. You don't have to watch NBC Sports Phillies coverage if you don't want to. You can watch the Press Row show. It's actually referred to as the #1 pregame, intermission, and postgame show this side of the Mississippi, south of the Arctic Circle, and north of the equator. So pretty big deal. Sean M. says that they should fire Sirianni. Fire him like Nick. I'll humor you, Sean. Nick, you're a great guy. We love your Fantastic visor. I haven't seen a visor like that, believe me, since Doug Peterson. We love Doug, but we didn't love the middle part. You can't trust a guy with a middle part. Let's just go down some famous guys with middle parts. Marilyn Manson. Don't trust him. We had Aaron Carter, rest in peace. He had all those great CDs back in the day, Surfing USA. We love Aaron Carter. He had the middle part. You can't trust it. Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He was on Home Improvement. He was the young brother. Great guy. We don't know what happened to JTT. We don't know what happened to him. But we go back to Nick, who's wearing a visor like he's handing out cards at a casino, playing a little bit of Texas Hold'em. And unfortunately, we have to call Nick's bluff. We have to call his bluff, folks. He's not a very good coach. He's been bluffing for very long, and he's been saying he's all in, and it's time to call. And when we do, he's going to be out. Believe me, Nick, you're fired. All right, we're done. That's there's that part. So here we are. And then Linda Joseph, by the way, says, if I were on Philly's postgame, it would make Anthony Sanfilippo freak out. Here for that. Love it. That would be awesome. So anyway, let's get off the Eagles now. I do feel a little bit better. I would encourage, like, if you want me yelling, go and find Crossing Broadcast from Monday. It's on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel. I yelled a lot, but we're almost an hour into the show today. I didn't intend to talk about the Eagles this long, but I'm trying to be a little bit more fair to what I saw. I'm still frustrated about the social media stuff. I think it's bad. I'm still frustrated that it definitely seems like there's a rift between the coach and the quarterback. But what are we going to do? At this point, Howie Roseman has it really looks like he's dug his heels in. It looks like Jeffrey Lurie's dug his heels in. Or again, it could have been a combination of the two. I don't know who it was. But Sirianni to me looks like a man without answers. He looks like a guy who was emasculated, and he looks like a guy who just doesn't know how to pull the nose up on this. Okay? That's where I'm at. Now, I do want to move on because there are a few other things that happened in the last few days that have to do with the Flyers, with the Sixers, and then the passing of two all-time greats in Philly sports. Two guys who really, one is a Hall of Famer. The other one should be a Hall of Famer. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I want to go very briefly, careful. Alexei Kolosov made his debut last night as a netminder for the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, he didn't get the start, but he was the backup to Ivan Fedotov. And he had himself what I would call a nice game, a nice performance against an Islanders team that had a lot of their best players playing. You saw Anders Lee, you saw Barzal, you saw Palmieri. They had guys on the team that are actually going to factor in and be actual Islanders players this year. It wasn't like you were playing a bunch of scrubs and a bunch of minor league guys. Now, the Flyers didn't counter with an A squad of their own. It was their B team. But let me just hit you with some numbers, okay? Alexei Kolosov came into the game. He played 28 minutes, 19 seconds, stopped 7 of the 8 shots that he saw. He came in relief of Fedotov, who gave up 3 goals. It was 13 stops on 16 shot attempts, okay? Kolosov came in. He looked good. He didn't look elite, but he certainly looked good. He wasn't made available to the media when he first arrived in the States. They didn't have a translator available, but the Flyers put out a statement that came from Kolosov in which he said he's honored to be a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. He's honored to be here and to play in front of this fan base. He definitely said this himself, 100%. So Kolosov finally got on the ice. To my knowledge, did not receive a cold welcome. In fairness, the game wasn't being played in Philadelphia. But now that he put in a strong effort, now that he put in a strong enough effort, I think it's probably safe to say, probably fair to say, that at this point, he's not going to get booed, or he's not going to get booed mercilessly by the Philly faithful. The next time he suits up, I don't expect him to face a chorus of boos. Now, we talked about this on Snow the Goalie last week, but the thought was like, do you play him in front of the home fans, get the booze out, he has a good game, and then everything's forgotten and forgiven? A lot of Flyers fans aren't even online. They probably don't know about the saga of him going back to Belarus and all that. He was allowed to go out and play on the road. He had a good performance. We'll see where he's at. Sean C. checks in and says, Kolosov only here for 6 weeks is a waste. He's going back. Just get it over with already. That's a tricky thing to say, too. Like, the belief is that he only wants to play in the NHL. If he's given the job as the starter at Lehigh Valley, but it's very clear that he'll have the chance to compete, and like he's one injury at the NHL level away from getting some starts, I'm not sure he's going to immediately turn back around and go back to Belarus. Sean M says, yeah, right. If he doesn't get the starting job for the Flyers, he's on a plane back to Russia. Not a good attitude to start your career. We have to be careful with the attitude thing. We're all going off of perception, and we're not going off of hearing from the player himself. We're going off of a comment from Danny Briere 2 weeks ago, where he said that they are of the thought that Kolosov wants to either start in the KHL or start in the NHL, that there's not much of an in-between. He doesn't want to play in the A. He did come over here. He wasn't necessarily obligated to come over here. Yes, he's under contract. He could have held out. He could have tried to get a KHL team to take him back on. Could have started another IIHF violation like what happened with Fedotov. They could have gone that route, chose not to. I will give Kolosov at least a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for now. But no, like the optics have not been good. Now we move on. There was a big trade made in the NBA that could directly impact the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm guessing that if you're a Sixers fan, or if you're an NBA fan at large, you have an idea what I'm talking about. The Knicks decided to break up the Nova Knicks before it ever started. The Knicks had 4 Nova guys, right? They had Hart, they had Brunson, they had DiVincenzo, and then they traded a lot of capital to go out and get Mikal Bridges. They have now since turned around and traded Dante DiVincenzo along with Julius Randle and brought in Karl-Anthony Towns. That has led people like Bobby Marks on ESPN to say that apparently the Knicks now have the best starting 5 in the Eastern Conference, which is silly and also like wildly untrue. But as of right now, your starting lineup for the Knicks includes some combination of Brunson, probably Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, what's the problem with Cat? Cat doesn't like playing center. He's kind of in that Anthony Davis mode. Doesn't like to be a center. Played very well as like a 4 alongside Rudy Gobert last year for a Minnesota team that kind of became the darling of NBA Twitter until Dallas figured out a way to shut them down. Cat's not a hard-nosed player like Julius Randle. Cat will likely alienate himself at some point with something he either tweets or says or plays a weak game against Joel Embiid or, maybe a Giannis. Perhaps when the Knicks play a Jokic, you'll see him get sunned again. There's a good chance here that it doesn't work for the Knicks. But just in theory, if you're a Sixers fan and you've been holding on to hope that Sixers could be the best team in the conference, second best team, does this change much? I think it changes the mentality of the Knicks. I'm not necessarily sure that it makes the Knicks a better team than the Sixers. I think that it gives them a better balanced starting 5. Having Cat play center, even if he doesn't want to, is still better than trying to figure out a way to wedge Julius Randle in. Like, as things stood, you couldn't have some combination of the Nova Knicks, OG Anunoby, and Julius Randle as a starting 5. Mitchell Robinson isn't coming back apparently until the very beginning of 2025, like the calendar year 2025. They needed a center. They went out and they got Karl-Anthony Towns. Does that strike fear into my heart if I'm a Sixers fan? No. I think it's a good move for the Knicks. I think it ends up actually being a better move for Minnesota because Julius Randle slots in very easily at the 4 alongside Rudy Gobert. You allow Anthony Edwards to go out and be a stud and be a guy who maybe looks more like that reincarnation of Michael Jordan that people thought he started to look like in the postseason last year. I think it's actually a very good move for Minnesota, and they get off a ton of money. They no longer have to consider moving Naz Reid. I think it ends up being a really good trade for Minnesota. I don't know what it'll look like for the Knicks. It doesn't fundamentally alter anything. I've now said quite a few times, I think the Sixers are going to be somewhere in that 3-4 seed range. And that's mostly going to be because of either injuries or load management to Embiid and to Paul George. And outside of that, I just don't see the Sixers competing for the top seed. Not because they don't have the talent to compete with Boston for the top seed, but just because I think they're going to try to play it safe and try to get a healthy roster to the postseason. That's what I think. Could I be wrong? Sure. Am I? Absolutely not. I'm not wrong. How do I know I'm not wrong? Because I tend to be very right about basketball. I tend to be. Don't let the hockey guy thing fool you. Okay. Now, last thing. 2 people passed away that were related to Philly sports. Very different human beings. And so we'll touch on this very briefly before we head out. Dikembe Mutombo, by all accounts, was an absolute gem of a human being. His son, if you haven't seen it, put out an absolutely beautiful tribute to his dad on Instagram. The kind of a eulogy of sorts that any parent could ever hope that their kid would have for them. Truly beautiful stuff. Mutombo was viewed as a beacon of hope to African players. Joel Embiid talked about it at Sixers Media Day. Mutombo was a Hall of Famer, was a guy who you didn't see embroiled in scandal, was a guy who found almost like a second life after his career through commercials with the finger wag. Dikembe Mutombo, great human being, gone far too soon, brain cancer, absolutely tragic. Later in the day, we find out that Pete Rose also passed away. Now look, Pete Rose, very different human being. Not viewed as a gem, not viewed as a mensch of the century, not viewed as a guy who is of the utmost character, a guy who was constantly embroiled in scandal, whether it was betting on baseball, whether it was some of the things that he had to say later on in life. We have to acknowledge the fact that Pete Rose was a sensational baseball player, the all-time hits leader. A guy who, like, the clip was going around. It's like a 6-minute clip of him and Alex Rodriguez and Frank Thomas from, I think, the 2016 or 2018 postseason. When you would listen to Pete Rose talk about hitting, you could hear just how freaking smart the guy was and how he approached hitting in a way that, like Frank Thomas even said, I never thought about repositioning in the box but not changing the swing. Like, there is a brilliant baseball mind there. But Pete Rose is the perfect example of when a great talent, something goes wrong up here, or maybe something's wrong in here, but I think it's more up top. Something goes wrong here, taints a legacy. He doesn't make it into the Hall of Fame. He doesn't make it in. He doesn't eventually convince baseball to allow him on the ballot or to get into the Hall of Fame while he's alive. Now, will they do a posthumous induction into the Hall of Fame? That would not surprise me. I'm not going to throw down significant money here that baseball figures out a way to get Pete Rose in. But the fact is, there are so many guys in the Hall of Fame who either did steroids or guys in the Hall of Fame who weren't great human beings, who are still in there, who maybe weren't as bad of people publicly as Pete Rose is perceived to have been. But it's hard to keep your all-time hits leader out. The response to the passing of both of these guys, totally different. Again, people who knew Mutombo, people who observed Mutombo from a distance, had amazing things to say about the guy. And that is something that we should all aspire to have when we eventually move on from this earth, is that we have people speak about us as glowingly as people did about Mutombo. I am not saying that Pete Rose was a gem or that he was a fantastic human being. I have no idea. I've never met the man. I do think that some of the people who were saying really classless things about the guy after the fact maybe are a little bit misguided, that when somebody passes, I think you just kind of let things be what they are. But in any case, both of these men played some version of a role in Philly sports history. Rose helps the Phillies win a World Series. Dikembe Mutombo is the center who helped to, in some way, shape, or form, try to slow down prime Shaq, and helped Allen Iverson to hand the Lakers their only loss in that 2001 playoff run and in that NBA Finals. Both of those guys have contributed to the Philly sports landscape. We thank them both. And we wish the best to both of their families and their friends who are trying to process, maybe in different ways, but are still trying to process the loss of both of these guys. Now I'm going to go over to the comments really quick before we head out. Sean M says the Raptors GM was really upset about Mutombo. Andrew Fawcett asks the question that I kind of posited before. Does he make the Hall of Fame posthumously? I think that they will. I'm not positive, but I think it'll happen. John Heyman said, okay. So Sean C says that John Heyman must have tweeted this out, put it correctly. He fulfilled the terms of his ban, sadly put him in. Sean M notes the young girl thing. Yes, that's the thing that I think is probably very fair to still be upset with. I think the betting on baseball thing was always just, I don't know, like it's morally wrong, professionally wrong. There were other things that he said or did that were worse. But again, he's gone now. He still belongs in their Hall of Fame. If we're going to have a moral Hall of Fame, it's a totally different story. But I can assure you that in every professional sports league's Hall of Fame, there are some people in there that morally probably shouldn't be. Andrew Fawcett says Mutombo was a real gentleman. Sean C says, yeah, Kobe Bryant still remains celebrated. That's a whole other can of worms. That is also true. Okay. That's it for today. If you haven't done so already, do me a favor. Subscribe to the Russ Joy Show on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I did see there was a 5-star review. I can't pull it up today. I'll pull it up on Friday's show. There's a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. The ratings are great, but the reviews I will read on the show as long as you leave 5 stars. Do me a favor. Share this episode with friends, with family, with Philly sports fans. You can share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram, share it on Facebook, wherever. Threads, Blue Sky, Truth Social. I don't care. Share it wherever you want to share it. Let people know about the show. We are on the push to 500 subscribers on YouTube. I don't know what that means. I don't know what exactly I'm going to do. If I get to 500, am I going to have a giveaway? Maybe. I could probably game the system right now by saying, I will give a jersey. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe not. I don't know. I can only say, in fairness, when it comes to subscribers, I think I have a list of anybody who makes it public, like who they're, what channel they're subscribed to. But maybe I'll do some kind of a raffle or something for a jersey of your choice. I don't know. But all the people who have subscribed already, I appreciate you tremendously. But do me a favor, go share the show. And anybody who commented live, do me a favor. When the show is done, go into the regular comments section, leave a comment, something that stood out from the episode, something that you liked, agreed with, disagreed with, whatever. That the algorithm likes that. Pound that like button, hit the ring the bell so you get notified whenever the show goes live. I'll be back on Friday with an all-new Russ Joy Show at 8:30 a.m. here on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram Live. I'll be everywhere. Do me a favor, though. Subscribe, like the video, share the video. I will talk to all of you on Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will talk to you all very, very soon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.